Do you really know who I am? Do I know who I am? What the hell is cultural code switching anyway? Welcome to Tales Under the Cat Tree. I'm your host, Dupes, and these are tales by humans for humans. After all, words and stories are what give meaning to the worlds we live in. Have you noticed that you sometimes sound different or use different words when you talk to different people? Maybe when you talk to your parents, or maybe you use specific expressions with people, say from the town you left behind so long ago. When I was in Newfoundland a few months ago, my friend Sylvia Warkentin introduced me to the term cultural code switching. This was a term that I had not heard of, but something I apparently practice. The definition of cultural code switching is the act of consciously or unconsciously adjusting behavior, language, and mannerisms to align with the norms of a different cultural context. To me, this makes sense, and I talk about myself as some sort of chameleon, but I had not yet heard this term. So what follows is a conversation, and I'm hoping this conversation makes you think about how you might act in different situations. Do you code switch? Are you just as much of a chameleon as I am? Do you code switch to survive or take advantage, or do you code switch to just fit in? Do you even have codes that you can switch to? These are all questions that I, Sylvia, as well as Sylvia's husband, Erwin, explore in our conversations. Coincidentally, Sylvia and Erwin were about to depart from Newfoundland, where they had been living for a couple decades, to Berlin, Germany. And even more coincidentally, I would be seeing them in Berlin. So this conversation is in two parts. Let's start in Torbay, Newfoundland, on the eastern edges of Canada, while we were watching a winter storm come in over its craggy coastline.
I'm Sylvia. I'm a tree hugger, nature lover, Oma, world traveler.
So what is cultural code switching?
Cultural code switching for people like myself who grew up German in Canada. I find myself, I'm almost like one of those third culture people. I'm not fully Canadian. I don't feel myself as fully German. And when I'm in Germany, I feel myself being different. My question to you is the dupes here you are in Canada different from the dupes that you are in Finland, different from the dupes that you are in Sri Lanka?
100%.
And that's cultural code switching. The term for that is cultural code switching. We don't think, okay, now I am in Sri Lanka and I will act this way. It just happens. And I'm like that. So I'm in Germany and I just act differently. Here in Canada, I feel myself, I'm more outgoing. In Germany, I'm more reserved. It just happens.
So believe it or not, I think I see a difference in me in St. John's, Newfoundland versus me in Kingston, Ontario versus me in Edmonton, Alberta.
Really? Even within Canada?
Absolutely. Especially the difference between St. John's and the rest of Canada. I've had people tell me that sometimes when I'm on the phone with someone from St. John's, my accent changes. I talk faster.
I haven't noticed that for myself. And I've lived all over Canada. I've lived all over the prairies. I've lived in central Canada, in Newfoundland before many years now. But that's interesting because there are differences. I noticed when we travel to Alberta, okay, people here are different. But maybe I do switch. Maybe I code switch there as well. That'd be interesting.
Okay, I have no idea about the studies of code switching. That's actually the first time I've actually heard the term, especially applied to this. What is interesting to me is that I think, and I can't speak for other people, so I think I am a chameleon. So I try to be closer to, I reflect the people who I am with in order for me to get along with them.
And to fit in.
To fit in. Because I think then people are more open to you if you fit in and accepting. So when I came to Newfoundland, I think I took on the characteristics of what it is to be a Newfoundlander. And then similarly, when I moved to Edmonton, I would, of course, have done the similar
things
thing.
there, to fit in.
And in Finland, I am actually a much quieter person. People who I work with would not actually recognize me of 20 years ago because I am so extroverted. There, I'm still considered extroverted. But I mean, they really don't know the extroverted dupes. I want to know, is it an internal thing that I have, that these are codes that
it's internalized. That's why I say we don't even necessarily notice it. Or you make a phone call to St. John's, it just happens. If internalized, this is how it's done here. It's not a conscious thing.
It's interesting. So when I'm in Sri Lanka, I talk to the shopkeepers in a different way. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do because my parents have taught me exactly how to do that. And I do it without even thinking.
Yeah. And that's cultural code switching. And it's not that I think, okay, now I am in Germany. Now I will act this way. It just an internal switch gets flipped and it just happens. It's like people asking, where are you from? And when people ask me, where are you from? Well, that's a complicated question. I'm not from one place. I was born in one place. I was raised in another place. I raised my children in another place. Where am I from? Mm-hmm.
Would you say you have a complicated relationship with home?
Yes. Very good. Yeah, that's very good. The saying is, home is where your heart is. But then I go to Berlin and we've made friends there and I like it there too. Home is lots of different places.
So that's where we left the conversation in Torbay, Newfoundland. After this visit, Sylvia and Erwin boarded a couple of planes and found themselves in their other home. A month later, after an unseasonably cold winter day in Berlin, Sylvia, Erwin, and I sat down to discuss how their switches had flipped since they had arrived in Germany. I had also had a good month to ponder the concept of code switching. So let's continue the conversation in Berlin, Germany. What did you first notice immediately as soon as you stepped off the plane onto German soil, and how you reacted and how you changed?
How everything is very ordered and organized, very regimented. You fall in line very quickly. You don't want to stand out and you don't want to be one of those people. You fall in line and you adapt. I find that I adapt very quickly because I've been back and forth, like I said, but it's not something I do consciously. It's kind of weird and my body sort of takes over.
What about other aspects of German culture and how you've immediately switched over without even thinking?
One that comes to mind almost immediately, even the first day, is grocery shopping. The way I interact with the cashier is very different from here. There's even jokes made about it where people practice bagging their groceries because this checker just whips it through and she says hi and then starts processing your order and there's no small talk. In Torbay, if I didn't engage in small talk with the cashier, she would think, okay, what's up with her today? And here, if you try to engage the cashier saying, like, what is she doing? Why is she talking to me? The very first time is always, okay, no talking. No talking to the cashier. And it's not because she's unfriendly. She has a job to do. And there are literally 20 people behind you. And you will stop them from getting their groceries.
So no small talk.
No small talk. You engage in small talk in Canada. Maybe we're considered friendly in Canada and like that, and Germans are not. Well, the day-to-day scenarios are very different. You don't engage in small talk as much.
But that's also a matter of perception. So, for example, if small talk is seen as impolite in Germany, and we consider it to be the polite thing to do and the friendly thing to do, of course, those people coming from another place would think that Germans are impolite or
that they think often that Germans are cold and unfeeling. We're reserved. We save the small talk for our friends, and they also don't want to reveal too much about it. By engaging in small talk, you give clues to yourself and hints about yourself. That's too personal.
German is different in many different ways. You were telling me a story about du and sie.
Yeah. When the neighbor lady came by and I, without even thinking, addressed her in the formal, and then she gave me permission, which is something you have to get. You have to get permission to use the informal du. And I didn't even realize I was addressing her in the formal. And it's just something you do. There's a level of reservedness that you save for people that you don't know that well, and until you get permission to lower that wall.
But would it be the same for you? So, for example, if I came up to you and addressed you in du and you'd never met me before,
I would be, oh, yeah. Interesting question. Yeah. I would, if you were a stranger and addressed me as du, first thing, okay, that person doesn't know the rules. It's not done here. Anybody on the street, it's always Sie. You're asking someone for help or you're asking directions for someone. Was sagen Sie? Was möchten Sie? Yeah. Restaurants, anywhere, stores.
Is code switching then just basically a way that we play into the stereotypes that we are presented with? And we choose to accept those stereotypes and be part of, as you said, this is the way things are done and I don't want to stand out. So I choose instead to just to play that part.
We as humans want to fit in. We don't want to stand out. And it's something even we learn very early on is, you don't want to be that kid in the schoolroom. And that just sort of comes with us, and especially for those of us who travel internationally a lot. The first few days I observe, what is that person doing? How are they interacting? Because you don't want to stand out. So the cultural code switching happens. You learn to adapt the culture. You don't want to stick out. It's a matter of survival, I think.
If you're talking about a person going as a tourist to a different country, like for example, if someone came as a tourist to Canada and acted in a completely different way than the norm of as a Canadian, we basically go, wow, that person is rude. And I think if you, for example, go to Japan or you go to Germany or Finland or wherever, and you act differently from how the norms are expected, people tend to have a fairly not so great view of the tourists who do that.
Absolutely.
So in some ways, those who are better at being able to adapt, even as tourists, to understand and show their, I guess, affinity or understanding of the culture.
It's a matter of respect, though, I think, too. Respecting, this is how they do this. I respect that, so I will try and be like they expect me to be, or they'd like me to be.
But is what you're talking about truly code switching? If they don't have another set of codes to switch to, we're talking about the Americans. They have one set of codes, for example, and many Canadians too. They're born in Canada. They raised within a Canadian context, and this is the only culture that they know. Some of them may know two languages, one well, the other not so well, but it doesn't mean that they're completely fluent in that other code, and even that code would not be the same as somewhere in France. So are we being critical of people that don't really have a chance? We have the benefit of having been raised with another code to switch to. So can we be too hard on other people who simply haven't had that benefit?
My argument would be then people who are, we call it unilingual, who haven't been exposed to other cultures, other languages. But I come back to what I said before, when you travel someplace and you observe and you see how certain things are done differently, how people behave differently out of respect for that person, for that culture, for that country, I would want to not stand out. I don't want to offend them by anything that I do. You can watch how things are done, like we watched how things were done when we were in Kenya, when we were in Cambodia, when we were in Egypt. We don't know the Egyptian culture, but we watched and we observed, okay, this is how you do things and this is how you pay respect to those people. We switch codes and we switch cultures. We don't have to know them. We have to respect the other culture.
I have an interesting hypothetical that actually isn't a hypothetical. It actually did happen to me. And it happened in Paraguay, and there were three of us there. I spoke German and English. One of them spoke German and Spanish. The other one, Spanish and English. So there was constantly one of us translating for the other. And the interesting thing was that we all had a Mennonite background. And so we switched to a third code for ourselves, and that was this kind of religious community that we were raised in, and how we then interacted with one another. The interesting thing was, as we talked to one another, there was always one of us translating for the other. But as soon as we kind of got into this mindset of, okay, we're not going to use Canadian, German, or Paraguayan Spanish as the basis for a relationship, but rather this kind of shared Mennonite heritage, all of a sudden there was something that changed in the dynamic of our relationship to one another. There were certain kinds of jokes that we could tell one another. And even though it had to be translated, it could be understood because we had this shared background that gave us this kind of, I guess, a set of codes that permitted us to laugh at certain things that we might not have altogether if we had reverted back to our original codes.
So it's a third culture. Sometimes I see myself as almost like one of those third culture type people. I'm not completely Canadian. I'm not completely German. I'm some sort of mishmash.
I get the code switching aspect of it. I get that, for example, we're infused with different cultures that we grew up with in terms of how we are seen racially, religiously, culturally, from a country, from a place, from a city even. But all of these things, it's all about us trying to find and being open to finding the thing that connects us.
Yes.
And we consider codes is basically a set of unwritten expectations that we each of us have that we can connect with. And we expect other people to try and find that with us.
Yeah, and it's a matter of being open to, what can be a common ground?
When we started the conversation about code switching, we were talking about how we adapt to different cultures. But I think we spend a lot of time looking at the macro cultures, like you are Canadian and speak with a Canadian accent, so therefore we don't expect you to speak German. Oh, but you do. That there's almost that switch, what the other person expects of you rather than...
Yeah, those stereotypes sometimes come into play. And if it doesn't match what we've come to understand, come to believe, it's almost startling.
Right. So for example, me code switching from being Canadian to Sri Lankan is one thing. But if the people around me aren't expecting that code switch, then it becomes a disconnect. If I'm explaining it very well, right?
Yeah, maybe they're being more forgiving. Well, he's not from here anyways.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're given more leeway. I've run into that too here. If I'm paying for something, let's say in a store with cash, first of all, I don't hardly use cash in Canada, and here even less. I don't know the coins here. I have to actually literally read the coins. But the cashier in front of me, she looks at me. First of all, I'm blonde hair, blue-eyed. I speak German. She assumes I'm German, and she's not understanding why I'm reading all the coins. In that moment, I become Canadian. My self-defense goes up, and I speak English to her. And then she backs off. In her broken English, she'll say, take your time. Or she'll show me which coins. And so, yeah, I switch back to my Canadianness if my survival, or if I'm feeling offended. They look at me and they expect certain things. And if I don't follow up with what they're expecting, they're startled by that. And then I switch back and forth.
You choose the advantage that makes sense to you.
Yeah, my survival.
It's the expectation, yeah.
It's a matter of fighting dirty. It truly is. You now have this person in front of you who's insulted a Canadian, and they're sure they're going to go to hell. I think I have another good example of exactly what you're talking about. We were in Egypt. Clearly, I'm not Egyptian, and I did not have the time to learn the Egyptian language, so I would not be able to speak with the people there. However, I did learn how to read their numbers, which are different than what we use in our part of the world. And I went to a store and I was looking at the watches. All of them had two prices. One of them was written in our numbering system and the other was written in, I guess, the Arabic number system. And that number was a lot lower than our number. And so I was speaking with the man there and we were talking about the advantages. His advantage was that he presumed that I could not read the Arabic numbers. My advantage was that I could read them, and I was bold enough to ask him about that. I asked him, why is it that the Arabic price is so much lower than the price for tourists? And he smiled. He said, you've learned our numbers. Thus, you're entitled to the Arab discount.
So to kind of summarize all of this, in my own head, I always felt that I didn't know the term code switch, simply to be polite and simply to get whatever message I needed across. And sometimes I didn't know I was doing it at all, right? Which is true. But the reality is that maybe those who are empathetic enough or can figure it out, the positive way is for us to be able to blend in,
Yes.
be polite, be respectful.
Absolutely.
But the reality of it is a much more base instinct that we have to survive and to have an advantage.
When push comes to shove, survival instinct maybe kicks in, and for good or bad, it may come across as rude, but right now it's a matter of survival.
When you first said the words code switching and I was trying to think about it, I was thinking about my own code switching. But over the last month, I realized that everyone code switches around me. And that's the thing. We look at all of these terms and we look at it from the lens of us and ourselves. But the reality is the opposite. Everyone code switches, but everyone code switches to you as much as you to them. That's just one realization I had.
That people code switch to us. Yeah. I guess that happens to us too. Sometimes here in Berlin, they realize, even though I speak German, there is a hint of English accent in mine. And people then, want, I guess, to show that they're accommodating to me and friendly to me, and then they'll address me in English.
Well, not just addressing you in a language, but may act according to the culture.
They are. And they approach us and, being warm and friendly, being less reserved, knowing that North Americans tend to be that way. And so they come out and they chat because they code switch to us. Yeah.
And I think true code switching is where you can actually switch from one culture to another and actually don't have that feeling at all. And I wonder if there are anyone who can actually do true code switching that way.
I don't think we're living this way. The longer we live, the older we get, we've got more of that influencing how we are, who we are. And we can't just separate, okay, I'll take this piece out of it and take this piece out, and then there's nothing left because we're an amalgam of all these different things.
Yes, indeed. We are an amalgam of all that we experience. I guess in the end, code switching is something that is so internal to us, we likely don't even know we are doing it. My realization in having this conversation with Sylvia and Erwin was not just about my own code switching, but also how much of a part of the human condition our cultural adaptability truly is. If you and I and everyone switches to try and blend in, to try and survive, to try and take advantage, well then, do I ever get to know the real you? Will you ever get to know the real me? Even more confusing, if I'm always code switching, what is the real me? In fact, the whole concept of quote unquote I becomes questionable. If we define ourselves by the basis of how others see us, then quote unquote I is definitely purely a fiction. But if then that quote unquote I, like a piece of quantum matter, changes to fit what others see, then truly, what am I? Anyway, now that I've managed to give myself an existential crisis, I want to thank Sylvia and Erwin Warkentin for having this conversation on air. Thank you for listening to another episode of Tales Under the Cat Tree. I hope this conversation gave you some food for thought. Listen to the archives wherever you get your podcasts or at tales.dupes.ca. This podcast is about the worlds we create, the realities we conjure, and the wonders of the human condition. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please help me reach more people by subscribing or sharing this episode. This podcast, including its intro music, is produced, edited, and created by Dileepa Vijayawardena. Give your pets a cuddle until we meet again for some Tales Under the Cat Tree. I don't know if there is a true Dupes anywhere left, to be honest. I have no idea where that person is.
And because we go back and forth between Germany and here in Canada so often now, where's Sylvia?